Calla Veyne thought she knew everything about her family, until the day she uncovered a hidden trapdoor in her grandfather Warren Veyne's farmhouse, leading to a nightmare so dark it would change her life forever. Calla Veyne had only heard stories about her grandfather's farmhouse. Tucked away deep within the thick woods of Shallow Creek, it was the kind of place people talked about but rarely visited. After Warren Veyne's death, Calla became the sole heir to the old property. She didn't know what to expect when she drove down the long, twisting road that led to it. The trees pressed close against the narrow path, their branches casting long, skeletal shadows across her windshield. The farmhouse finally appeared at the end of the road, and it looked even worse than she imagined. The house was a sagging gray structure with broken windows and a roof that looked like it might collapse any moment. Ivy and wild vines strangled, the stone walls weaving in and out of cracks and holes. The front porch tilted downward, and the screen door hung loose on one hinge. As Calla stepped out of her car, a chill ran through her despite the warm spring air. The place felt forgotten by time, like it had been abandoned long before her grandfather ever passed. She pushed open the front door, which creaked loudly, as if protesting her entry. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with dust and the sour scent of damp wood. Every step she took made the floorboards groan under her weight. Cobwebs stretched across the corners of the ceiling, and a layer of dirt coated nearly every surface. Old furniture sat draped in white sheets, giving the place the look of a mausoleum. The heavy silence inside the house felt unnatural, like something was holding its breath. Determined to get through the job quickly, Calla set to work. She started upstairs, sorting through closets full of moth-eaten clothes and boxes packed with yellowed papers. Most of it was junk, forgotten books, broken picture frames, and faded postcards. Yet every now and then, she found something that made her pause. An old locket containing a photograph of a woman she didn't recognize. A stack of letters tied with a ribbon, addressed to people she had never heard of. There were no familiar family pictures anywhere. It was as if Warren Veyne had erased any trace of the life he once had. Hours passed, and the late afternoon light slanted through the dirty windows, casting strange shadows across the floor. Calla moved downstairs to the living room, hoping to finish before dark. She lifted a threadbare rug, intending to shake the dust from it outside, when she noticed something odd. The wooden floor beneath the rug was scratched and gouged, as if heavy furniture had been dragged back and forth. In the center of the marks was a metal ring bolted to the floor, a trap door. Her heart began to pound. She hesitated, kneeling beside it, running her fingers over the cold, rusted metal. The edges of the trapdoor were worn smooth, as if opened many times before. She tugged hard, and with a screech of protest, the door creaked open to reveal a set of narrow stairs descending into darkness. A cold breath of air escaped the opening, carrying with it a smell far worse than dust or mold. It was a metallic, earthy scent that made her gag. Something about it felt wrong, deeply wrong. Shining her flashlight into the gloom, Calla could just make out the stairs winding downward, swallowed quickly by the blackness below. She thought about turning back, about locking the door and never speaking of it again, but something stronger pulled at her, a need to understand, to uncover the truth. She placed one foot on the top step. It groaned under her weight. She paused, listening, but the house around her remained deathly silent. Gathering her courage, she began her descent, each step taking her further away from the familiar world above and deeper into whatever secrets her grandfather had buried beneath the floorboards of the old farmhouse. As she disappeared into the darkness, Calla couldn't shake the feeling that some invisible line had just been crossed, one that could never be uncrossed. Whatever was waiting for her below wasn't just part of Warren Veyne's past. It was something still alive, still lingering, in the cold, damp air of the cellar, hidden for decades and now finally disturbed. The old farmhouse wasn't just a house filled with memories. It was a tomb, and it was ready to reveal its deadliest secret. The wooden steps creaked beneath Calla's feet as she made her way down into the cellar. The beam from her flashlight shivered with her hand, barely cutting through the thick darkness. The air grew colder with every step, so cold that she could see her breath in front of her. It didn't make sense. The temperature above had been warm and sticky, but down here it felt like winter. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and pressed on, feeling as if unseen eyes were watching her from the shadows. At the bottom of the stairs, her boots touched dirt. The floor wasn't paved or finished. It was raw earth, damp and uneven. The walls were made of rough stone, slick with moisture. Small puddles reflected her light back at her in broken, trembling patches. She swung the flashlight around, trying to take it all in. At first, it looked empty, just a wide, dark space with no clear purpose. But as her eyes adjusted, she saw the shelves. There were 5 of them, lined neatly along the far wall. Old wooden boards sagging under the weight of strange, personal items. Calla moved closer, her heart hammering in her chest. There were necklaces, with missing stones, worn wallets, cracked eyeglasses, faded children's toys. Some were covered in a thin layer of grime. Others looked recently cleaned, almost as if someone had come down here to care for them. Each item had a date carved into the stone wall directly behind it. The date stretched back farther than Calla could believe. Some were from the late 1970s. Others were as recent as just last year. The cellar smelled strongly of rust and dirt, but there was another scent buried beneath it, faint but sharp. It was the smell of old blood and decay, so faint that it hovered at the edge of awareness, refusing to be ignored. Her stomach turned as she realized these weren't just old possessions. These were trophies. Warren Veyne had kept something from each person who had disappeared. On the far end of the room, Calla spotted something different. A large wooden chest, almost hidden behind one of the shelves. Dust rose in a thick cloud as she pulled it free and knelt before it. The padlock that once sealed it had long since rusted away. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of old photographs, each one yellowed and curling with age. They were all portraits, men, women, even teenagers, posed in various places around town. Some smiled, others looked startled, as if the photo had been taken without their knowledge. A few of the faces seemed hauntingly familiar, like she might have seen them once on missing persons posters long ago. In the center of the chest, tucked between the photos, was a small leather-bound notebook. Calla opened it, feeling the brittle pages crackle under her fingers. Each page contained a name, a date, and a location. Sometimes there were notes, short and chilling, easy to follow. Trusted me quickly, resistant, loud. She read until the letters blurred in front of her eyes. She slammed the notebook shut and backed away, feeling the room press in tighter around her. As she turned to leave, her flashlight beam caught something, metallic sticking out of the dirt floor near the base of one of the shelves. Curious but afraid, she knelt and brushed the soil aside with her hand. It was a ring. Not a decorative one, but more like a handle, half buried in the ground. She hesitated, then pulled. The dirt shifted heavily, revealing a second, smaller trapdoor, old and rotted, but still intact. Her heart climbed into her throat. Another level. Another secret. Panic clawed at her. Part of her screamed to run, to leave the house and never look back. But a heavier part of her, the part that had already seen too much, knew she had no choice. She needed to know everything. She needed to see what her grandfather had hidden even deeper underground. She grabbed a rusted crowbar from a hook on the wall and wedged it under the edge of the trap door. With a hard shove, it broke free, splintering with a loud crack that echoed through the cold, wet cellar. Below her, darkness yawned, deeper and blacker than anything she had ever seen. A rotten, sweet smell wafted up, thicker and more nauseating than before. It was the smell of death. Calla realized she was standing on the threshold of something far worse than forgotten trinkets or dusty photographs. She wasn't just uncovering her grandfather's secrets. She was digging up graves. Her flashlight flickered, casting long, dancing shadows along the walls. Gritting her teeth, she placed one foot onto the rotted wooden ladder leading down. She had to know the full truth, no matter what waited in the depths below. The deeper Calla went, the stronger the stench grew. Her flashlight struggled against the thick, suffocating darkness. The ladder shook under her weight, brittle and ancient, threatening to snap with every step. When she finally reached the bottom, her boots sank slightly into the soft dirt. The air here was different, heavier, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. She raised her light and immediately froze. The walls weren't made of stone like the cellar above. They were packed earth, roughly carved out by hand, claustrophobic and pressing in from all sides. Ahead of her was a narrow passageway leading into the unknown. Calla hesitated, but curiosity gripped her harder than fear. She moved slowly, her footsteps muffled by the damp ground. Strange, faded markings decorated the walls, scratches, handprints, symbols she couldn't understand. Some looked desperate, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. Her mouth went dry. This place wasn't just hidden, it was a prison. As she turned a corner, her flashlight revealed a small chamber carved into the earth. It looked like a crude room, barely tall enough for her to stand. In the center sat an old, rusted bed frame with shredded, rotting bedding tangled across it. Heavy chains were bolted to the floor on either side. Calla's stomach churned as she realized this wasn't a room meant for living. It was meant for holding someone captive. Scattered across the dirt were more personal items: a torn shoe, a cracked bracelet, a broken watch frozen at 3:17. Each object was a silent witness to the suffering that had taken place here. Calla knelt and brushed dirt off a half-buried ID card. The photograph was faded, but the name was clear. A woman reported missing nearly 10 years ago. Calla remembered seeing the story on the news as a child. Everyone had assumed she had run away. No one thought to look under Warren Veyne's farmhouse. Shaking, Calla stuffed the ID into her jacket pocket. She couldn't leave it behind. She needed proof. She needed others to see what she had uncovered. Rising to her feet, she moved deeper into the passageway. It twisted and turned unpredictably, like the veins of a giant creature. With every step, she felt more trapped, more suffocated by the weight of the earth around her. Another chamber opened up ahead, larger than the first. Here, the walls were lined with wooden crates, stacked neatly from floor to ceiling. Most were nailed shut, but a few lids hung open, revealing their grim contents. Bones, some clean and dry, others still wrapped in scraps of clothing. Skulls stared at her from the dark corners, their hollow eyes telling stories she could barely imagine. Calla stumbled back, her flashlight trembling in her hand. She wanted to scream, but feared that if she made a sound, the whole earth might come crashing down to bury her. In the center of the room sat a large, rusted file cabinet, completely out of place among the dirt and decay. She approached it cautiously. The drawers were jammed, rusted tight, but she managed to pry one open. Inside were files organized with eerie precision. Newspaper clippings of missing person reports, hand-drawn maps, notes detailing routines and vulnerabilities. Warren Veyne hadn't just been a killer. He had been methodical, organized, and patient. This wasn't madness. It was careful, practiced evil. Calla realized then that her grandfather had kept trophies not just upstairs, but also detailed records of every life he stole. She pulled out a folder at random and opened it. Inside was a photograph of a teenage boy and a list of dates. Notes in her grandfather's neat handwriting described his habits: when he walked home from school, when he was most likely to be alone. A final note simply read, "Acquired. June 12, 1989. Calla slammed the drawer shut and stumbled backward. She had seen enough. The full horror of what Warren had done pressed down on her, squeezing the breath from her lungs. She needed help. She needed to bring someone here who could understand the scale of what had happened. Forcing herself to move, she retraced her steps through the winding tunnels. Every shadow seemed to reach for her, every sound amplified into a whispering threat. When she finally climbed the rotting ladder back into the cellar, she burst into the stale, dusty air of the farmhouse with a gasp, as if she had been underwater for too long. She staggered out into the fading daylight, clutching the ID and the folder against her chest like a lifeline. The world outside seemed wrong now, too bright, too clean. Nothing would ever feel normal again after what she had seen. Somewhere deep in those tunnels, Warren Veyne's dark legacy still whispered from the walls, waiting for the right moment to be unearthed. And Calla knew she couldn't hide what she had found. She had to expose it, no matter what it cost her. Calla didn't sleep that night. She sat in the driver's seat of her car, parked just beyond the reach of the farmhouse's broken windows, staring at the crumpled ID card and the folder resting on the passenger seat. Her hands shook with exhaustion, but her mind raced too fast to let her rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the empty eye sockets of the skulls and the long scratches carved into the dirt walls. She knew she couldn't walk away from this. But part of her also knew that exposing her grandfather's crimes would not be simple. Warren Veyne had been respected in the small town of Shallow Creek. To everyone who knew him, he was the quiet, hard-working farmer who kept to himself. No one ever suspected he was capable of anything so monstrous. Calla could already imagine the disbelief, the rumors, the anger. She would become the center of it all, the woman who dug up the town's darkest nightmare. At first light, Calla made her decision. She needed evidence, something undeniable, something that no one could explain away. It wasn't enough to tell people what she had found. She had to show them. Before she left the property, she decided to document everything. Grabbing her phone, she returned to the farmhouse, steeling herself against the waves of fear and nausea that crashed over her as she stepped inside. The house was eerily silent, as if it knew what she planned to do. Her footsteps echoed off the dusty walls as she made her way back to the trapdoor in the living room. She paused, taking deep breaths, then pushed it open. The rank smell rose up once again, almost enough to knock her over, but she pressed on. She descended carefully into the cellar and shined her phone's flashlight across the shelves of trophies, filming every detail: the necklaces, the wallets, the children's toys. She made sure to zoom in on the carved dates behind each item, the silent testimony of so many stolen lives. Then she turned toward the second trapdoor, the one that led even deeper underground. Her body protested, every instinct screaming at her not to go back down there. But she forced herself to move. She descended into the tunnels, her phone shaking in her hand as she filmed the prison chambers, the crates of bones, the rusty bed frame with the chains. She captured it all, making sure there could be no doubt about what Warren Veyne had done. As she finished filming, a low noise caught her attention. She froze, heart hammering. It was faint but unmistakable. The soft, dragging sound of footsteps on dirt. Calla swung her phone around, shining the light into the dark tunnels behind her, but she saw nothing. Telling herself it was just her imagination, she turned back toward the ladder. But as she climbed, the noise came again, louder, closer. Something, or someone, was moving in the darkness. Calla scrambled up the ladder, nearly losing her grip as panic surged through her. She threw herself into the cellar, slamming the trapdoor shut behind her. Breathing hard, she listened. Silence. But her gut told her she wasn't alone anymore. Something had been disturbed when she uncovered the secrets buried in the tunnels. Something that didn't want to be found. She didn't waste another second. She ran out of the farmhouse, not daring to look back. She jumped into her car, locked the doors, and peeled away from the property, dust and gravel spraying behind her. Only when she was miles away did she allow herself to slow down. Calla parked at the edge of town and sat for a long time, trying to gather her thoughts. She knew the police wouldn't believe her without proof, but she had the video, the ID card, and the folder from the file cabinet. It was enough to force them to listen. Still, an uneasy feeling clung to her, like invisible, fingers brushing against her skin. She couldn't shake the thought that whatever she had awoken down there hadn't stayed trapped behind that trap door. She looked at the farmhouse in her mind one last time and promised herself she would never go back. But deep down, she had the terrible feeling that some secrets didn't stay buried, no matter how much dirt you piled on top of them. Some secrets had a way of digging themselves back to the surface. Calla arrived at the Shallow Creek Police Department just after noon, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear her own footsteps. The video footage, the photographs, and the folder pressed against her side were her only shield now. She walked through the glass doors into the small, stale-smelling lobby, feeling every pair of eyes turn toward her. In a town like this, everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew she was Warren Veyne's granddaughter. The officer at the front desk raised an eyebrow when Calla placed the evidence in front of him. At first, he looked skeptical, as if assuming this was some misunderstanding. But as he scrolled through the video, his expression hardened. Without a word, he led her into a back office where two detectives listened closely as she told them everything she had seen, everything she had filmed, and everything she had found underground. Hours passed in a blur. Calla answered question after question, her voice steady even though her hands trembled. The detectives took her phone, copied the footage, photographed the ID card, and carefully handled the old folder. They promised her they would send a team to investigate immediately. They didn't say it, but she could see it in their faces. They believed her. The horror in their eyes mirrored her own. That evening, Calla returned to her small apartment on the outskirts of town. Exhaustion weighed her down, but her mind refused to rest. She sat in the dark living room, the television playing. Quietly in the background, though she wasn't really watching, she felt exposed, vulnerable, as if invisible eyes were still tracking her every move. The feeling hadn't left her since she had climbed out of the tunnels. It clung to her like a second skin. A knock at the door startled her. She jumped up, heart racing. Peering through the peephole, she saw a man she didn't recognize. He wore a dark jacket and a cap pulled low over his face. Something about him made her blood run cold. He knocked again, louder this time. Calla backed away from the door, holding her breath. After a long moment, the man turned and disappeared into the night. She double-checked every lock in her apartment, pulled the curtains tight, and sat curled up on the couch, a knife clutched in her hand. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind outside made her heart lurch with fear. The next morning, news spread through Shallow Creek like wildfire. The police had uncovered human remains beneath the Veyne farmhouse. The site was now a full-blown crime scene. Reporters swarmed the property, their vans and cameras parked haphazardly along the narrow country road. Townsfolk gathered in small, whispering groups, struggling to accept that the man they had trusted had been a monster hiding in plain sight. But with the news came something else, a chilling discovery. Authorities found footprints in the tunnels that were fresh, pressed into the damp earth. They were not Calla's. They were much larger, heavier. Someone else had been down there recently. Someone who might still be alive, hiding, watching. Calla's stomach twisted when she heard the news. She hadn't imagined the footsteps that night. She had disturbed something when she entered that hidden world. Something had woken up, and now it was loose. For days, the town remained on edge. Missing persons cases once considered cold were reopened. Families mourned loved ones they thought had vanished without explanation. And through it all, Calla became a symbol. Some praised her bravery, others avoided her, afraid of what she had unearthed. Some whispered that Warren Veyne hadn't acted alone, that maybe there were others like him, hiding among them still. One night, just as she was beginning to feel a fragile sense of safety, Calla found a package on her doorstep. There was no return address, no note. Inside, wrapped carefully in brown paper, was an old Polaroid photo. It showed Calla herself, standing outside the Veyne farmhouse days ago, flashlight in hand, unaware that she was being watched. The message was clear. Whoever had been in the tunnels that night wasn't finished with her. Some secrets, Calla realized with a deep, bone-deep fear, didn't die with the people who created them. Some secrets lived on, creeping in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again.